I could actually have a house that had a pretty bad landscape, but I had a beautiful vision of a master plan. But if I have that master plan, I can be way more rested. And so aspiring towards that best is kind of, I still think, beautiful.
I agree.
But you know what it does? It allows for good enough.
No, okay. Today on the Curious Builder podcast, we had Jonathan Blaseg in from PEBL Architecture, and I've gotten to know Jonathan over the last, I suppose, 6 months, and we've got great chemistry. And it was just really fun to hear his origin story, how he started the landscape company, and just really the challenges of, how do you get over the stereotypes and how do you cultivate more work from architects and builders? If you're interested in basically how landscape architects work and sort of how we're folded into high-end architecture, you're going to love this episode. Without further ado, here is Jonathan. Welcome to the Curious Builder podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today, I'm joined in studio with Jonathan Blaseg from PEBL Design. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you. It's
Yeah.
nice to be here.
All right. Well, it's kind of funny because we had an hour-and-a-half design meeting already, and then we had lunch, and here we are. We should have had our lunch on the podcast, except people would have been listening to us chew, which doesn't sound great on a mic.
Absolutely. No, it's I love when a conversation just gets going, and I feel like anytime you're in a meeting and you step out, you have so much self-reflection.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I think, it's interesting. I think you're our first landscape architect that's come on.
I was wondering.
Yeah, no, you are, because we've had a number of architects, designers, builders, obviously, and other entrepreneurs. But I feel like, I guess we'll start right in and we'll get to your story in a minute. I feel like, so I've been building for 21 years, and I'm curious to see if this resonates with you or if you're too close to it, being just with the great design work you do. But if this is a familiar story, early on when I built, I used to have allowances. I built a home for like $500,000. I'd have a landscaping budget of like $2,500. This is back in like, no, I know it's silly, right? And this is also back in like 2005, right? Where $2,500 got you still nothing. But anyway, I'd be like a few plants, but like people prioritize the house. And the first thing that was cut was usually like, if we had to do value engineering, was we cut out the basement. So the basement would be unfinished. We would cut out, this is well before I was using architecture and interior designers, but landscaping was always this thing, especially in the suburbs, that you could do later. And then I think maybe 10 years into my career, basements are almost always in now. And now we have designers. But somewhere around 2017 or 18, I finally started smelling the roses and realizing that like good architecture, shockingly, reinforces the architecture of the home and just makes it feel better. And it's not that I've never loved good landscaping. It's that my clients just never let me do it. And so it sort of jaded me personally. And now fast forward where I am today, I won't work on a project without having the architect, the landscape designer, really now what they want to scale it. You and I just got out of a budget meeting, and they can grow this, but at least they have the plan in place. I'm just curious, why is landscaping kind of like the whipping child? Am I wrong? That's just my path. But do you find that that's kind of a common story among, let's say, builders and homeowners in terms of how they look at landscaping, or are you too close to it because they're only hiring you if they already value landscaping, so you don't really see that dark underbelly?
Great point. No, everything you said resonates, right? It's part of why I started PEBL in so many ways. One story or narrative I always like to think about is how our landscapes are so hodgepodge together in so many ways, like residential landscapes, right? It's because there were blue hydrangeas on sale at Home Depot, and Jack just had $100 leftover dollars from his bonus or whatever. So we bought those hydrangeas, and that's why they're in front of his house. He didn't have a plan, but he could do it. And I think that's where psychologically, so many people think I can put a plant in the ground, and they enjoy it too, right? I think there's also so much tied to even growing up maintenance of your own home. I love to ask couples or clients or whomever, what was your landscape like growing up? Did you have this prim and proper?
That's a great question.
Did you have tall fences in the backyard? And you get these really interesting stories from a couple, like if one had one and one had a totally different, and it starts to bring out these different sort of dynamics with regards to value systems and how they like to, like one might hate landscape, like actually doing any landscape maintenance. My wife is a landscape architect, and she'll probably listen to this, and she does not do any landscaping. I mean, I have this one picture of her in our like vegetable garden after we've been dating like 6 months, and I relish it because it was the moment I thought maybe she would be into landscaping. But I think there's just like so many dynamics about people and their relationship to landscape that is different than homes. You know, not many people have put up sheetrock, right? Not many people have framed out a home. Not many people have done those things, like fix their plumbing. It's like, okay, I have to call a plumber now. Something broke. And so there's just a association with landscape. Also, I think that landscapes, residential landscapes in particular, they evolve over time that much more. Because here again, you can be more incremental. You can be like, oh, I want to add something to my boulevard. I just want to add these sort of things. And people take joy in it. I like to argue that if you have a plan, it can be that much more meaningful. You can say, when I add that blue hydrangea, that it's part of a bigger vision. And therefore it has that much more meaning and can grow and grow and grow.
I mean, it's funny. I can't believe it's taken me this long to think of it. A home doesn't, we're trying to keep the best. I don't know if I agree with the statement, but most people would say like the moment the home is done, it's in its most perfect state it's going to be in. The maintenance is trying to maintain as close as it is to new. And that goes to a lot of things, cars. I mean, honestly, most things. But things that grow, I mean, humans, kids, trees, plants. I mean, obviously we're going with landscaping here. They're constantly growing and getting better, which is sort of the inverse of a house. I've never thought about that before until you were just saying about how it grows, because having a plan with how the vegetation is going to move and color, and it's way beyond, I joke all the time in my client meetings, you've heard me say this joke, is like, I'm like the bubonic plague to plants. Like there's nothing I can't kill. And I don't even need Roundup. Like if it doesn't thrive on neglect and ignorance and lack of attention, like it's not going to grow in my yard. So I need stuff that's going to, do its own thing, because I take no satisfaction or joy in like, I've got 500 other things I want to do besides going to the yard and do it. But so many people do enjoy sort of the zen of having the peace. And my neighbor, I swear every single Saturday spends like 5 hours outside, and I see him out there and he loves it. And I'm just like, I can think of so many other things I want to do, but it brings him joy. So it's mainly just a value statement, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that comment about how things age over time, I mean, it's a heck of a challenge, right? When we put sites in, they usually kind of don't look the best. And the goal is that they're going to get better and better and better. But I also say all the time, plants are really good at dying. And landscapes are intended to fall apart, similar to homes, but like they have different inputs. I mean, half of our work is because there's a water problem, and something's been washed out, or something's just like going wrong. Like we're oftentimes solving so many problems on a site as opposed to like just decorating. It's like, oh, that's like a secondary thing. And so, I mean, it's just really important to think through.
What percentage of your work is with let's say an architect or a builder, or then that's how you meet the client, versus you're working straight with, the end client?
For us, almost all of our work comes through a builder or an architect.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's 50-50 or 48-48.
Sure.
But
so close.
Anymore, our practice is not coming through, individuals. Like I even joke that when we market, like when we put something in a magazine, we were just talking about some advertisement, we are marketing to architects and builders more so than actual homeowners, because kind of what we started with, in a way, there is a disassociation with that value. And that gets vetted through the builder usually and the architect, because they know the value. They kind of know the cost too. And so they can help to sort of assuage those concerns, and value it and say, hey, no, we really should think about this because it's going to be worth it in the end.
I mean, I can only speak to my own path, and maybe I'll share a little bit here. I mean, we'll have all your tags in the show notes and everything, but your website is incredible. Very good branding, very crisp. I like even the way PEBL is spelled, PEBL, no E. I'd be curious later to know why that is, unless it was just trademarked. Like, we can't have the E, but we can go L. But I remember, how like when they say you need to see advertising like 7 times or 14 times or 21 times before you do call to action or remember. I was very familiar with your brand well before I knew who you were. And I think what finally, because I'd seen it in ads, I'd seen it, a lot of high-end builders, it seemed to always be associated with high-end architects who I wanted to work with, high-end builders who I wanted to be peers with. And I kept seeing your brand show up. So, I mean, you were obviously doing it either intentionally or it was being paired with that tier, which we've already talked about. And for me, we were called in on a couple jobs where they had a landscape architect. And, and if there's one thing, I feel like this is a safe statement, but I do think architects love design, and meaning all architects, and architects love other architects to collaborate with. Several of the architects that you and I have worked with before or are currently working with, they're like, hey, when it comes to the house, I mean, they reinforce each other, but like, hey, this is PEBL's domain, or this is the architect's domain, but we want to collaborate because they know that being partnered with a landscape architect, they know now that the builder has made a value statement, as is the client, which is going to make their architecture on their home also stand out that much more. Am I right in that sort of value statement? That
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, they are so different, right? I mean, let's talk about landscape architecture, right? I have a master's degree in landscape architecture. Same program as the architects go through at the University of Minnesota. I've taught actually, since 2011.
For 13 years, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if anything, some of my favorite classes have been, I've had the pleasure of teaching a couple of studios where half the students are architects and half are landscape architects. So I get a chance to put my opinions a little bit earlier into them. But it's a rigorous thing, right? We are fully accredited. We have standards that we have to live up to, and liability and ethics, and all of those things put us, I think, at a professional level that we hold ourselves accountable to. And I think landscape architecture gets punched into that commentary on just landscapers or landscape design, and so back to the original comment, like that sort of value system and sort of recognizing it as a profession that is different. Having architects and builders who already value it and then can be the trusted advisor to their clients to say that, it just goes so far. So when we enter into the room, we're just set up well. And we are close to it, right? I love to ask people, hey, who's your favorite landscape architect? Who's your favorite landscape architect, Mark?
It's Jonathan.
How many other landscape architects outside the city?
2. I only know 2. I know 3.
I mean, it's so like we are close to it, right?
Right.
Like, I can name hundreds and hundreds.
Right.
And stylistically, why we love them and why we're inspired. And with clients, so frequently, I get going. I was in a meeting the other day, and I think I even prefaced it, but they paused and were like, "Hey, I feel like I'm getting a lecture on plant design here." Like in a good way, I think, and because I'm like, we think through the depth of these things, like whether it's a plant selection, like a type of little blue stem, and we know why we put it there, and we have like a story in the back of our mind of why it should be there, and we want a client to know that, so that if their friend comes over, they can tell them if they want to, but they probably don't care. Maybe they just want it to be pretty, but like we want that value to be able to be applied if possible. And in that, it applies in so many ways.
The thing that resonated with me, I mean, it's clear, I mean, obviously, even when you talk about it and anyone listening can tell, but like you're very passionate about it. Like I'm gravitated towards creative types, and I also gravitate towards people that are really passionate. And when they're together, obviously, a lot of magic happens. And so I'm not an expert, have zero interest in being an expert, but I love passionate people. And I recognize like real good work when it's done. And I'm like, I love that. I don't know how they did that. I want to do that. That's how I view landscape architecture. So I know more about building just because I've been doing it for 21 years. So I'm a little bit more dangerous in the architecture arena. I guess you would have to answer this. I'm probably a pretty good client to have because I will never tell you any selection ever. I'll be like, okay, whatever you pick, because I know nothing, literally nothing about plants. And so, but I really much appreciate, and it's so much more than plant. I mean, hardscapes is probably now getting into, structural stuff. And I like the creativity when I'll see like an advertising or I'll see I saw something on your website today when I was looking at it before you came in, and you had a little kid playing with a little Nerf basketball, but then behind it was like this metal screen. It was on your website. I don't know if that's your son's house. Yeah, I kind of figured. And but I was like, that's really clever, which is odd timing because my boys, 7 and 5, are like outgrowing the sandbox that we put in. I'm like, I need to do a little basketball thing in our little Minneapolis yard. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, I got to talk to Jonathan about I do a little, because I'm a little worried about the ball flying down into the street and then them chasing it and getting hit by a car because boys are dumb and don't look both ways, at least mine. And so I'm like, okay. But anyway, my point is landscaping solves a lot more issues if we allow it to. We just need to partner with people that can kind of say, hey, here's what I would like to do. Can you help me achieve it? And then you can come up with all kinds of cool ideas.
Oh, well, and you hit the nail on the head, right? Landscape architects don't just design plants, right? We do all the hardscapes, we do all the drainage, and really, in so many ways, the framework for the site, including siting the home, getting the elevation correct. The first step I usually do going into a project, depending on where I get brought in, some projects we get brought in right at the beginning, like still the visioning when they bought the property, toured around with them and the architect. And sometimes they've dug the foundation and everything's going in and we have constraints heavily set. But the first thing I do is try to identify, if there's additional costs that we could have saved out of the gates. Usually that's walls, and drainage, grading, things that I'm like, oh, why did you put that there? In order to frankly carve out more money for the landscape budget.
I mean, a bigger site allows, I guess you have to do more stuff, because sometimes when you're like infill, a lot of our work is tear downs and you do have a lot more constraints, right? I mean, you've got obviously size, but neighbors, even geographically, there's just not much room to site stuff on. I haven't personally I shouldn't say that, I'm doing it right now, where we had to export all the dirt because there's no site, nowhere to put anything. I mean, the city lots, there's a lot more complexities than most people would give it credit for. And obviously building, we won't go into all the parts of building because it's a whole other podcast.
It is, but they're beautiful challenges that I think add layers of intrigue and complexity to what we do. Like you said, I'm very passionate about what I do. And as a professional, one of the most interesting things is when you start to do everything too. You mentioned marketing earlier, construction, all of these things. As a passionate kind of interested person, I think I could have done a lot of things in my life, but actually did do a lot of things before landscape architecture. But when you go down those rabbit holes, you get excited about them and you see the opportunities.
We had talked about this, and maybe we'll go back to how just mostly we focus a lot on business in this particular podcast setting, and we can talk about good stories and whatnot. But your journey into landscape architecture and how you got there, I'm very curious. It seems like, and I know you're going to agree, but I'm curious for you to expand upon it a little bit. The architecture route, whether you're doing home architecture or landscape architecture, I believe, is so heavily influenced by the commercial track. I've had a number of landscape architects on that either stopped their education and stayed as a home designer or went on to be a full architect. But it seems like residential architecture and residential landscape design is kind of like the unwanted stepchild of commercial architecture. I just feel like it's very odd to me that there's so much talent in residential architecture and landscape architecture. Why is the commercial sector like this 800-pound gorilla? And I don't know, can you speak to that a little bit? Am I right or wrong in that?
Absolutely.
But why? I don't get it.
It starts at the education, at the universities, and the value systems that get embedded there, right?
Tell me more. I'm very curious, like, why is residential construction, we all have to live somewhere. Why is it so sort of shunned?
Well, I definitely never took a class in residential design, which is funny, right? Like how many people come out of a program and end up doing it, and there's no classes on site design relative to home.
It makes no sense. So, that's crazy.
But I will also, we don't get always taught like the actual skills that we need to use, like AutoCAD drawing and, things like that. You get taught design oftentimes. You get taught to be inspired. You get taught to sort of test boundaries and go through those things. So I like bounce back between being highly critical of, certain universities and then highly like observant of like, wow, I came out really inspired. And so that's step one, right? I also, on a tangent, landscape architects and architects do have oddly different tracks sometimes, I think, education-wise. So a lot of architects get their undergraduate degree and go straight into their graduate degree and then go on to professional practice. So they're, more in their mid-20s, right, when they're starting. Whereas in my graduating class of landscape architects, nearly everybody was in their 30s. Everyone nearly, I think there were only 2 or 3 that had come straight out of an undergraduate program. They had lived another life. They had totally different bachelor's degrees. And so you end up with kind of a different group of people who are just kind of interested.
A little more seasoned in life.
It's definitely more seasoned in life. And so I think that they have a different sort of bounce back response when they get into their professional careers. And so you'll find landscape architects who work in so many different ways that aren't directly applicable to working with even architects or municipalities.
This episode of The Curious Builder is brought to you by Olive & Vine Socials. If you're a builder, a designer, or an architect looking to grow your brand without dancing on TikTok or spending your whole life on social media, listen up. Olive & Vine Socials specializes in Pinterest marketing, blogging, and email strategy for luxury home brands. They help you turn your beautiful work into a strategic SEO-driven content that drives real traffic and connects you with your ideal clients without burning you out. Ready to grow smarter and not harder? Visit oliveandvinesocials.com and tell them the Curious Builder sent you. Just so you know, I've been working with Alyssa over at Olive & Vine for 3 years. She helped us launch the podcast. She's helped us grow our brand at Mark Williams Custom Homes. I could not do what I've done without her help. And I'm more than happy to announce that she's our latest sponsor for the Curious Builder podcast. For those that have been listening to the Curious Builder podcast, you know how much I love the Contractor Coalition Summit. It's been the single biggest force multiplier in my business over 21 years. We're excited to announce again that we're coming back to Chicago, November 7th through the 10th. All the details can be found at thecontractorcoalitionsummit.com. And under the promo code for a $2,500 discount, type in Curious Builder. We'll see you in Chicago.
Like I'm kind of always intrigued by what my classmates are doing in life because less than half of them probably work in the industry.
Wait, you get a landscape degree, but you won't be in landscaping anymore?
I mean, here again, so a term that gets used with landscape architects all the time is generalists. Like we end up having to do way too many things. Like think about, and this is at the highly professional level, right? Whether it's master planning or it's city building or it's, watershed planning. We really toe into the civil engineering world so much that the scales are so all over the place. And, somebody might go into a program thinking, hey, I want to be an environmentalist, right? And this is sort of like a lens towards that. And it is, right? And so then when they graduate, they're able to apply that degree in a different way. Whereas, and architects do it too all over the place. But usually, especially if you're younger and you're 18, you go to your undergraduate degree in architecture and then you go to your graduate, you have kind of you've been sort of educated in that. And then you come out and you get a job at a fancy firm, right? And that fancy firm probably is a commercial firm because they're doing bigger projects and maybe they can actually afford brand new people too. That's probably another.
So the training sequence.
So the training sequence ends up happening. And then you discover sort of who you are and what you want to do. And then a lot of the times the residential realm is entrepreneurs. It's people who say, hey, I figured out who I am and what I like. And maybe that's working individually with people, more one-on-one. I know in the commercial realm, you work so much with committee groups or, larger client groups. And so there's a different dynamic. And so I think people can draw upon their own human, upbringing and such and sort of relate to residential in a different way. So it feels more natural to then sort of ebb into, as opposed to the opposite. I barely ever heard of anybody who went into residential and then eventually moved to commercial.
Right. Yeah, it seems more like a move to home. This is just pure guess of people that graduate. And I'll ask you this for if you have any pulse on it for residential architects as well. What percent of people that, let's just say you got your landscaping architecture degree and you are in a commercial firm, what percentage of people stay in commercial versus residential? We're not accounting for people that drop out and do something different. What do you think the split is on resident to commercial architecture?
Well, architecture is so different than landscape architecture.
No, I'm sorry. For you specifically, landscape architects, commercial to residential. What do you think the split is on people?
Wow. I think so few landscape architects who start in the commercial realm switch over to residential.
They do. So
the world
90-10, 80-20?
I would say 90-10.
Wow.
Because the world of residential landscape architecture, I think, is different, right? Mm-hmm. And it does really speak to why I started PEBL, in that, like you also said, budgets aren't that big, right? So if you have a home, the architecture budget could be an 80-20 split, right? So when you have a smaller sort of budget, it's just harder to be a professional sometimes, right? And so I think those commercial practices, the like larger landscape architecture practices, they have more to work. Like they have larger projects, they have, and they also are very varied, as we kind of alluded to before. Almost every landscape architecture practice at that scale does master planning. They do park planning. They work at a commercial scale, and then they might moonlight in residential. I've worked at many different places. The first place I worked was in California. I was out at Tom Leader's studio, which did massive scales of projects in China and all over Asia, and then plenty abroad here. The initial project I was brought into was a redesign of the upper Mississippi River in North Minneapolis, essentially, and like a full master plan of that. Huge scale, crazy scale, right?
Like what kind of scale? Like give us some perspective. What does that mean?
It was the whole park plan for kind of the adjacent land from downtown Minneapolis to the northern extent of Minneapolis.
So like the whole river along the north
all the river.
Yep.
So, and a lot of it was called River First. It's an amazing plan, and
Did it get built?
No, of course not. but portions of it have. There's been interventions along the way that have happened. Like the Shear Brothers site was a small part kind of intervention that was made, and it has inspired people along the way to kind of do things. Notably, there's the Upper Harbor Terminal site that's becoming a park now. That was one of the first projects I ever worked on at Tom Lear Studio. I actually worked at it.
It's funny. You're in California working on one in Minnesota.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then I moved back to Minneapolis to work at Cohen and Partners. And ironically, I worked on the Upper Harbor Terminal site when I was at Cohen and Partners years later. And then it passed on to another firm who's finishing it now. But, so these scales are all over the place. And so after Tom Lear Studio, I came to Cohen and Partners, which is kind of one of the local legend firms around here, I would say, in the landscape architecture world.
Well, all three landscape architects that I know, all turned out to have worked with you, which is funny. So my pool of who I know is very small. They all worked at Cohen and Partners, I guess.
It definitely feels that way as you start to kind of look around. And so on your kind of question about residential versus commercial, I think Cohen and Partners was one of these unique practices that had a great opinion on design. And that allowed them to work in a lot of different realms and not caring I'm doing master planning or I'm doing somebody's small backyard. Because I think Shane loved to design and he knew who he was and he just did it. He did what he thought was the right projects. And that found him doing residential projects as well as commercial projects, as well as, you name it, projects. And, and probably that sort of passion for design attracted a lot of great designers along the way.
Sure. That totally makes sense. When did you know it was time to start your own business? And walk us through kind of those first steps. Because you've had it for, 7 years? Or 9?
Yeah, pushing that. So, I mean, like I said, so Cohen and Partners was such a great education in design. And I think every designer needs to have that sort of mentor along the way that kind of clicks with them. And through that process, I found myself, and along the way, I also kind of had a rejection, let's say, of kind of big D design, glossy, high-level rise buildings and super fancy stuff. Let's just call it super fancy, right? Very, very technical term. and partly because I bet 80, 90, maybe even more percent of the projects I was doing weren't getting built. I was just doing really pretty renderings.
So because they're too expensive or they got shut down in committees, cities? Why don't they get built?
A combination of all the above.
Yeah.
Humans being bad at making decisions sometimes. I mean, it's like a whole thing, right? It makes me so sad how much human capital gets wasted on the design side of the world sometimes. Definitely in public projects where there's so much by committee, in the process of decision making and money allocation and timelines. But I was seeing so much great work, and yeah, things were expensive at different times, would be over budget, whatever. I just sort of had a deep sadness about the effort being put forth. And so I ended up going sort of an about face. I went to a nonprofit architecture practice called Mass Design Group that was founded, I think, in Boston, but their first major project was in Kigali, Rwanda. And oddly enough, I think I went out to try out for a fellowship. I was going really low. I was going to make half as much money and just do this fellowship for this nonprofit. And I applied, and they're like, well, you're a little overqualified. We know this other practice. How about you go work there? And so they called me, and I was like, oh, this could be a really cool fit. And they had this massive conservation agriculture university, 3,000 hectares in southern Rwanda. And they kind of needed to expand their landscape architecture practice to be able to really absorb it. And I was like, that sounds amazing. I grew up on a farm. I love conservation agriculture. I like high design. They had everything going on. And so I teamed up with them, went to work with them, spent some time living in Rwanda with my family, just learned a ton.
How old were your kids at that time?
My kids turned 3 and 5 while we were there.
That's pretty sweet.
It was the greatest gift I could have had. I mean, the timing of it couldn't be more perfect. Not only did they have my kids have an extremely inspired father at the time because of the design work I was doing, but I was able to just leave our life here and live in a little house in a totally foreign country and just have that really special time together. It was so amazing. But one of the cool things about also working there was when you're working in different locales, sometimes you don't have the same access to construction. And so we ended up actually kind of developing and pushing at that time, it was called mass made. So I wouldn't call it design build, but they were mass is amazing. Please, everyone look up Mass Design Group. They're just like my heroes. But they developed this sort of build entity where it was heavily focused on environmentalism, and it was heavily focused on kind of studying material procurement and really just being good stewards of the planet. But it also revealed sort of the lack of a workforce, essentially relative to what they were doing, and that they could sort of develop that workforce. They could say, hey, I have this giant scale of a project, and we can actually create like a workforce and teach people how to be masons, teach people how to do these things in order to do the great work that we want to do. And it will be better because of it. And they have good TED Talks, and so I'll leave Mass behind. But I was really inspired by what they were doing. And so I kind of carried that forward towards PEBL when I wanted to do my design build thing. So the real reason I left Mass was my family was going through some health issues with my mother-in-law, and so she was suffering from Alzheimer's at the time, and so we had to move back, and so family dynamics really is what brought us back home, and so in a way I was like, oh, I guess I got to do something different, and I kind of looked in the mirror and I said, okay, well, geez, I've done this, I've done that. What am I going to do next?
So you had, at this point, you were not teaching at the University of Minnesota.
I think I was still teaching. I mean, but
okay.
I was just moonlighting. I just like one class a semester.
Sure.
A little bit here and there. But yeah, I looked in the mirror and I was like, okay, I've done the big D thing. I've done this like world traveling thing. What do I want to do? And and I grew up very humbly in South Dakota. All my uncles are carpenters. My first job was as a carpenter at age 14, getting paid $5 an hour, working 12 hours a day. Digging holes was like normal to me. Like working really, really hard was normal. Heck, when I was 22 years old, I bought a house and tore the roof off and put a second story on it in South Minneapolis because that just made sense to me.
Right.
I was like, you just build things. So I always wanted to get my hands dirty. I really wanted to always be associated with construction. And I had seen such disconnect with that in these other practices. And so I thought, okay, well, I want to start a design build practice, right? Which also made more sense because budgets are smaller for landscapes, and then I could work on my friends' backyards for all intents and purposes. But that's hard, right? Like starting a construction company is different than a design practice. And so I was able to kind of team up with a slightly more, established construction practice. And so we partnered up, and I partnered up with a close friend of mine, Leif Peterson, who was a fellow classmate in the graduate school. And so the name actually comes from a combination of our last names, Peterson being the PE and Blaseg being the B.
Look at that, revealed.
Yeah, it's a little
hot take.
A little clever.
I love it because the first one I saw was, of course, to me, it was like a North Shore beach, like PEBL, right? Mm-hmm. It was like this beautiful water, stone, just had some really good Zen quality going on. But I love a good story. I haven't had her on the podcast yet, but Sarah Imhoff and her husband, they're architects in Stillwater.
Yeah.
So Imhoff, IM, in imprint, it has IM from their name.
Yeah.
See, same deal. And so I love when there's a story in the name. I don't know. I like that.
We were trying to find a third person with a J, so we could be PB and J. just didn't work out. Yeah, I thought it was cute, and it's a silly landscape thing. If anything, it was like a little bit of, because there is so much nose turned down at residential landscape design, because they don't always have landscape architecture, that also the cutesiness of it I kind of always loved, like the pebble kind of like cutesiness.
Have you ever had anyone be like, hey, do you know that pebble's spelled with an E or two P's? Or do you ever have people like just mess with you?
No, the funny thing is it's actually pronounced people.
Oh, it is?
No, I like it. We are the people.
Touche.
So anyway, but yeah, marketing, and so the marketing aspect of it
works.
It's fun.
Yeah.
I like to not take myself too seriously.
Mm-hmm. So as you've sort of developed, you said basically you've got 50-50 between builders and architects. Someone once told me that if you want to catch a certain kind of fish, then you should go to where those fish eat. And the way it dawned on me was there's a magazine company that does, do you know what geofencing is?
Yeah.
So like you can, put, from target marketing. And so like, let's just say in Minnesota, like the Galleria or Wayzata or certain shops or certain districts, or if you're in, New York, maybe it's Madison Fifth Avenue or whatever your clientele is, you could sort of, if people are into horse riding, you could geofence Canterbury Downs or like the polo event that we went to. And anyway, it's just really interesting. What got me thinking about this in terms of marketing is, that builders introduce you to clients, that's where work comes from, and architects. How have you sort of developed those relationships with those two parties?
Good design. It's as funny to say, like when I started PEBL at first, I was like, oh, I've worked with these great builders through my projects at Cohen & Partners. I'm like, oh, they'll totally be excited to work with me, right? Because they know me. And they just kind of like laugh at me and be like, well, you're trying to build things now, Jonathan. You're a designer. And they're like, okay, shucks. So I had to really dig in and take a bunch of small projects and prove that I could do it. Like I could apply good design to, I think, smaller projects. And then, you cut your teeth that much more. And they do know you through maybe your reputation, just, through working on projects together. And reputation evolves. And, in the case of us, we frankly just got one big project, like one kind of project that came across our table that had some struggles and they needed a problem to be solved, and we swooped in and I think impressed everybody. And then that just kind of creates some momentum. I am actually really horrible at marketing. Like I don't have any signs on our like sites, like site signs. I was just at a site yesterday. I was like, goodness, like it's on the top of my list and I haven't touched it for 3 years. Same thing, we just don't do any marketing. So I would like to think it's just good word of mouth and trying to be true to yourself. It's weird because landscape also is like the tail that gets wagged by all the dogs, right? We really come in on the end. And so we don't get to control the process very much. One thing I've been trying to say a little bit more is that when you have a trusted process, like when I go to a new builder partner or a new architect, and architects are easier because our process is so similar to the architects. The builders are different. Every builder is different. And so trying to articulate, our value through our process as well is something that, I don't know if that's marketing, but what it does is it continues to get us good projects and better outcomes. When we don't follow our process and we allow ourselves to get wagged more, we still have good projects, but it's just not always as rewarding because we're not able to convey that value to clients. Like we love what we do. We want everybody to know.
Ultimately, and I think this is true for interior designers probably as well, you probably fall more into their camp than architects and builders, because the lion's share of the work in our market, in Minnesota anyway, I've talked about this on the podcast, let's say the three main groups, interior designers, architects, and builders. In Minnesota, I think builders probably have the lion's share of the leads coming through them, probably through the strength of the Parade of Homes. It's 75 years old. It's, rock solid. Everyone grew up in Minnesota going to a parade or being aware of it. The other parts, it's architecture first, and then they introduce the partners. Where I'm going with this is not once did I mention the landscape architect. And so it's like, I think a lot of clients, for me, at least, and again, I'm biased because of my own path, like I needed to be educated what the value was, so that once I understood the value and once I could place value, like, oh, I see what this does now. Now I'm a trusted resource and advocate for landscape design to my client who trusts me. They see a beautiful home. It's no different than, the cabinet shop, the painter, all the other hundreds of people that the client expects me and depends on me to pick. I'm also pairing up, the architects typically have a chance to interview for the project, but the landscapers tend to be the people that we select and say, this is who we're working with. This is your best chance. And clients are go, oh, okay, that sounds great.
Because they trust you by
Well, exactly. No, 100%. And so there are some benefits to it, but I think the real key is educating the builders.
This episode is brought to you by Adaptive. If you're still chasing checks and juggling spreadsheets, it's time to upgrade. Adaptive is revolutionizing how builders get paid with AI-powered bill pay, automated draws, one-click payments, and built-in lien waivers. Faster payments, fewer headaches, and total visibility. Adaptive takes care of the back-end chaos so you can focus on what you do best, building. We've used Adaptive for 2.5 years and trust them to keep our projects moving and payments flowing. Learn more at adaptive.build and simplify the pay process today. For more information, you can also listen to episode 10 and episode 15. When it comes to quality, craftsmanship, and performance, Pella sets the standard. Whether you're building custom homes or designing a timeless space, Pella offers innovative window and door solutions that blend beauty and efficiency. With showrooms and experts around the country, Pella makes it easy to find the perfect fit for your next project and their team to support it. Build with confidence, build with Pella. Visit Pella.com to explore products and connect with your local rep today. For more information, you can listen to episode 1 or listen to episode 109, where we bring on Pella owners and founders at Pella Northland, as well as their innovative team behind the Steady Set innovation.
What's interesting too, I think, from the client standpoint and the value, I feel like I'm selling so much right now.
No,
but it's like funny because I really
is interesting.
sincerely believe it, that I think the architects love working with a good landscape architect because it's like that extra sounding board. Like there's a beautiful, I think, humility to designers that doesn't always get allowed to come out. Mm-hmm. Like we are not, maybe all architects think that everything they do is amazing, but I do. I am humble. Like I want to make people happy. And so, yes, I get hired to put out my best vision, but I also want them to feel okay with saying, oh, I don't like that part of it. It's why so often I do 3 designs I'm like, show me something you don't like, because I want it to be a conversation. And I think that I know that architects frequently like working with us because we can be a sounding board for ideas or help them solve a problem and just kind of also be in the room.
It's a better result. I also think I forget who told me this, but they use the term healthy tension. So I think you have a healthy tension between the architect, the landscape architect, the interior designer, and the builder. Traditionally, those 4, and probably the client, maybe sometimes too in this scenario. But we're pushing and pulling, and we've had that on our projects. Architect wanted this. This was a different. You get through it, but at the end of the day, everyone is viewing the project, and the project is better because of that healthy tension. Excuse me. And I think interior designers also have to face that a lot too, right? They're often called in. I try personally to assemble the team from day one. On the project we're working on together right now, we had the architect, the landscape architect, the designer, and the builder was all selected on day one. Everyone had, was unified from the beginning. That doesn't always happen. A lot of times when an interior designer comes in, and people are wondering who holds the microphone. I keep using this relay of the 4x100 relay. You have one leg but the baton, we all share in the victory. We all lose. If the baton gets dropped, we all suffer that loss in the Olympics in this analogy. And so maybe in the beginning, maybe it's the builder. I hand it to the architect. The architect hands it to the interior designer. The interior designer hands it back to the builder. Now I guess we have multiple people running this race. And then it goes back to my point is it's very collaborative. And without it, you can't run this race effectively and win as a team, in my opinion.
It's a long race too.
Mm-hmm.
We were just talking earlier about the dynamics of being design build versus, a designer and a builder separate. And, there's just so much different responsibility that everybody has to each other. And having that tension to be able to have those conversations and push pull is really a challenge. If anything, what's challenging for us a lot of times is being the designer and the builder, because we're advocating for the design, so much so, but we're also building it, and there's a cost to that. We have to have a conversation about that, and getting to the point of understanding what somebody really wants, what their value point really that the healthy separation sometimes between an architect and just a solitary builder can be really nice.
There's not very many. I've interviewed one or two. There's very few architects that are also builders, and vice versa.
And why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's kind of right brain, left brain. I think there's different skill sets. I mean, if I was to isolate it down, I'm not saying builders aren't creative, but we're kind of in a get it done kind of attitude. Like, we need to get from A to Z. And this is, you kind of need someone on the chariot whipping the horses. Sorry, horses. Like, we got to go. But yet we still need a strategy and a game plan. That's traditionally the architects. And I guess my point is, going back to that healthy tension, I think you kind of need a little bit, because I've had one architect said, if we stay in design land, we could design for decades.
Totally.
And I had one architect tell a client, like, I think they were talking about how thick is your plan set. He goes, I can do 20 pages, 50 pages, 70 pages, 200 pages. What do you want to pay for? And he goes, but we found that after there's a healthy median somewhere in the middle, let's just say between 40 and 60 for this higher end architect. And they said, anything after that is just wasting your money. Because when Mark is building it, if I drew everything that Mark is going to encounter, we'd be in design land forever. It's never going to, I could never stop drawing. It'd be way better when he, in their course explaining construction administration, when we're in it, hey, we're at the framing detail. There's a swoop of the roof that's going into whatever. How does this get detailed? It's not that the architect didn't think about it, but like, hey, we need to, this telescope, we need to get in a little closer, or microscope, I guess, in this analogy. And we need to get closer. Here's the detail on that. It's way more effective to do it that way than to try to anticipate every single question that someone may or may not have. Anyway.
I love that attitude. And I mean, here again, why I got into design build was that respect for the build process and the fact that there were going to be so many decisions to be made and so many changes that I personally, as a professional, had witnessed over time, and wanting to stay involved. As a landscape architect, you want to stay involved in a project all through construction. But oftentimes, you might get cut out. They might not want to pay a landscape architect to show up, some annoying design fee, right? And so being able to be associated with the build, we get to stay and make sure that that product is fully visioned out. It has so many different.
I think the other thing that's important too is, building a custom home and the whole project, like, it takes a lot more. This has kind of been my new line lately. It's going to take longer than you think, and it's certainly going to be more expensive than you want. And I use it in those terms because it's also up to us to set expectations, mainly me, because let's say, at least so far, most of the stuff that we built, clients have come to me first and then I arrange the team. And so I'm kind of outlaying, like, this is what's going to happen. This is the scenario. This is how it's likely to go. But it is sometimes it's daunting. If we talk about all the meetings, it becomes a lot. And a lot of our clients have full-time jobs and they're very busy, and they end up being some of our best clients because we're still in the service business. And I think the best projects are ones who are professionals and they allow you to do your work. They check in, they want to know what's happening, they want to be involved. But like, great, go do what you do and bring it back to us. But sometimes I think when we show, you're building a custom home, you do get to see how the sausage is made. There's no secret. Like, it's a long process. And I feel like a big part of our industry needs a big dose of hospitality training and customer service training, myself included. And I'd like to think I'm good at it, but I can certainly get much, much better because we do this every day. We get it's almost like if you're an endurance athlete, you get used to running a long distance. But for someone who's never run more than a mile, running 5 miles is kind of a big deal. And we do this all the time. So how do we make this more approachable? Because I bet there's a lot of clients that never engage in the design build process because it's not a clear process and it takes too long. And the cost, obviously. But if you could eliminate, there's 3 things I just said. If you could eliminate maybe one of them, possibly 2, I think we'd get a lot more clients, and I think a lot more people would get engaged because it is really rewarding. It is really fun. The people that do it are just like, oh man, they often will do it again, at some point, because it is a very rewarding process. Like anything, it's not without effort, but it is rewarding in the end.
Well, and it's rewarding because of the personal dynamic of it. To me, I just feel such a responsibility for people. Like, we were telling a story earlier where I was kind of talking about how at some point in a project we were talking about the cost of something, us and some architects, and we were kind of laughing, right? And it occurred to me that we were like laughing about our clients' money and how expensive something was and like how rude that. I was like, wait, that kind of can sort of could feel rude. And we hit pause button and made the comment, look, it costs that. That is actually what it costs these days. It's just that the comparison was when I grew up, a can of Coke was 50 cents. And now a can of Coke is, I don't even know, maybe it's $2. I don't drink Coke. But the point is, every time I look at
Coke
it,
Coke is our main sponsor of this podcast. We just got canceled. Thanks a lot.
I'll stop lifting up.
We need LaCroix as well. We really need a LaCroix sponsor.
And I'm just like, look, I have to laugh I can't get used to that, like that cost. It is what it costs. And so there's like an expression of humanity in that moment, I think, like me just sort of feeling like, hey, wow, I'm awkward about this. And, and so I think in the design build, in the world we are in design and build and all these different things, it's just people, right? And so I say to clients all the time, it's a kind of a part of our mission statement, is making a commentary on that this is a long process. You're going to be with us. Whether you like it or not, we'll either become hopefully friends, more than enemies, but that, we are going to be a part of your life. And that if you can take that approach to it, and that's why our mission says it the way it does, that it can be more rewarding, and that you at the end love your house more instead of having some like post-traumatic shock from the process.
That's so funny you say it in those terms, because I just had a flood of memories. I'm thinking of homes that I've built, and I could attribute certain things to it, like, oh, that was Jonathan's idea. I really appreciate that nuance. Oh, that was Angela's idea. I love how that came together. Oh, you know what? That is the client's idea. And like, I guess what I'm saying, like it ends up having a personality.
It does.
And that home could never be created without one of those partners on it. Mm-hmm. And we're building, every home is a prototype. It's never been built before. Will never be built again. Certainly not with the same team. Obviously, some people do semi-custom and things like that. So it might take on the same shape, but for sure, landscaping. There's never been one you can't even do the same. No. It's not even possible.
Well, there's all the talk about AI these days, right? And I'm terrified of AI for architects, let me tell you. But on the landscape side, and don't get me wrong, it'll definitely replace a lot of landscape design. But the complexity of the constraints and hopefully, I'm sure every architect's rolling their eyes at me right now, like, no, we're all perfect and special. But sorry, I've not made fun of architects enough on this yet. That'll be a whole different episode. But like there's the constraints of sites. They're unique, and they always will be.
Mm-hmm. What would you say? We're doing a series right now on Tuesdays called Losers or Winners, and I always feel like we learn better from our failures than we do from our successes. I shared one about an AI note taker that I had. That was a doozy. During your career of owning a business as an entrepreneur, what are some things that stand out that you're like, oof, that was a big misstep, but it was a super valuable learning moment where you feel like, you now going forward, you feel like, oh, wow, I'm much better prepared. My business is either leveled up or it's gotten better because I learned from whatever happened.
I mean, that's, here again, another whole episode. I have a motto, which everybody in our office knows well, which is fail faster. Because we're going to fail. I mean, it's inevitable. And so you need to push things to the point where you kind of recognize those issues or can ask the critical questions that bring up these memories. So in my practice, the biggest lessons learned kind of come related to that sort of where construction meets design. And it's, number one, sort of an enthusiasm for design that you got to get it built. It's like, who cares if it doesn't get built, right? The fanciest thing on the planet, if they can't afford it, don't do it.
I shared this quote yesterday. It was, don't let the best be the enemy. No, best is the enemy of good enough. Do you think that's true?
Yes. No, I don't. Only because I believe in aspiration. And I think the mind is a powerful thing. It's kind of like the master plan comment earlier. Mm-hmm. Like, I could actually have a house that had a pretty bad landscape, but I had a beautiful vision of a master plan. I could rest. My wife knows this. I have to work towards perfection in my built environment. But if I have that master plan, I can be way more rested. And so aspiring towards that best is kind of, I still think, beautiful. But you know what it does? It allows for good enough to me.
Oh, okay. That's fair. I mean, I think it's very situational. I mean, I could argue any point one way or the other because I could make an argument for both, right? Like, I don't think the NASA space shuttle, I think I want the best. But actually, I shouldn't say that. Elon Musk has proved that wrong. NASA, I've heard it like, right? It's, the Ferrari, and SpaceX is making a bunch of Ford F-150s. They're still great vehicles. They get you to space at a fraction of the cost. But, we can go the best of the best of the best on every single thing. I can't think of, I did this analogy the other day of a team. You can't build, I know you like baseball. You cannot have a team unless you're the Dodgers or the Yankees. And even then it doesn't work. So you can't have the best player at every single position at the maximum salary. Even if you have the money, it won't work. You still need a team chemistry. You look at like the Bulls. I mean, yes, you had Jordan and you had Pippen and you had a bunch of role players. They're still the best team because they, together. And I think that's true in business. I think the partners we choose in, this is just a statement. I'd be curious how you react to this. Probably pretty favorably because I want to work with you. Is, spoiler alert, if I had a choice between being really good or someone I really like, I will pick someone I really like. Like, I think I told you, like there's a lot of talent in this town for builders, for architects, for interior designers, for landscape architects, honestly, for every position. So one of the most important things is, who do you want to spend your time with? Like, I generally enjoy you. I think you're funny. I like your joy. I like your passion. But on top of that, being incredible at what you do, they're like all these other wonderful things. And we have to make value judgments. I think clients come to us and say, hey, there's other builders we could build with. I've used this as it's not even a sales line. It's just the truth. Who do you want to spend the next 3 years of your life with? It's a long time. It's not a minor commitment, and it goes both ways. There are some clients that are just like, these are amazing. Like, I had a client once after we built her home. We have a bi-weekly meeting schedule, and we met with her for 2.5 years between design and the build. And when we were done, she sent me a note after like a month of like kind of like quiet, and she's like, I feel like a member of my family has gone missing. It was really sweet.
It's true.
And so you get really attached.
Yeah. I just told this story, I think just yesterday, to a client, because when I started PEBL, previous to that, I had this project at Cohen Partners, and actually my company, Landscape Renovations, that's the name of the parent company of PEBL, Landscape Renovations, had built the project in like 2014, 2015. Anyway, I love the project so much. I still like dream about it. And so when I started PEBL, I missed it. And so I actually I started my own maintenance division so I could take that project.
Oh, funny.
And so I took the maintenance
just so you can go back
division, there. And then I eventually merged with Landscape Renovations, and now we all do it happily together. But I just walked the site the other day with the client, and I just kind of missed the project.
Was that the one with the water fountain that we just saw?
No.
You and Chad were in the video. We were like, oh, we were just there.
That was a different
Okay.
But it's still a great project.
Yeah.
No, what you said also like about wanting to like who you are and what you do, I think it probably resonates hopefully with a lot of entrepreneurs in that, that's the point, right? You're doing something that you have a little bit more control over. I find it interesting with my employees and my partners, I never call them employees really, my collaborators, whatever, that I'm always gut checking against those lessons learned because I'm so sensitive to the process I've had to go through. And a big one is kind of being selective with partners, because I know when I was earlier on, I was saying yes to everything. And I'm still pretty bad about probably saying yes to everything, but like recognizing just how much more joy you get from certain partners and doubling down on that. Like I was just in a meeting the other day and I was just like so happy with who I was in the room with, because it just felt like a homecoming in so many ways.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as we as we slide into second here on a double, what are you most excited about in the next year? I mean, business wise or personal?
Oh, just continuing to evolve the narrative of our work. I'll never get it right, but I find myself so excited when I walk into a room with new people, and I compare it to parenting, right? I remember when I had a child and I realized that I couldn't just download everything I'd learned and all the mistakes I'd made into their head. Like they were going to have to make those mistakes themselves, and the dauntingness of that. And sometimes like when I meet a client, I'll always ask like, oh, have you worked with a builder before? Is this your first go around?
Right. Yeah.
And you just have those moments where you're just like, I just want to know everything about them. I want them to know everything about me in order to see if it's going to be a good fit. And and so like I want to get through that. And so for us, from the standpoint of the company, it's about narrative and talking about our process and then drawing it all up. So recently over the winter, we actually did like racing matrix, I think it is. You know what that is? It's like responsible, accountable. I don't know, I should know. But anyway, it's essentially just drawing out your entire process from start to finish.
Sure.
That 3-year process. And sort of identifying all of the tension points along the way and saying, how can we be better here? How can we not get caught?
We have something similarly called the emotional roller coaster. And there's a graph that shows like, design, people are like really excited. And then you get to pricing, they're really depressed. And then you start, they're excited again. You get to drywall, nobody likes drywall, it goes down again. But it's like, it ends up being this squiggly line, like a stock ticker. And it's just up and down, up and down. But I have found it that giving it to the client at the pre-construction stage and telling them, you can expect your path. I think it takes away some of the highs and lows, because I think expectations, again, I go back to this, I fail at this all the time, but I think all business owners, and I don't think you could ever get this right, but the more we can tell our clients what to expect, the less that they'll be surprised. I had someone one time tell me that you can either be, how did it go? I'm not going to say this as eloquent as they did, but basically you can lead the information or you can be asked for it. But if you tell a client what to expect versus them asking for it, and I've been guilty of this many times, or I should say I've failed at this and our team has failed at this many times. We keep trying to get better at it. But if a client has to ask us a question in terms of not like a genuine question about something we couldn't predict, but if they're like, hey, totally. Is this going to happen soon? What's next? Like the client shouldn't have to ask us what's next. I don't think. We should be better at saying, this is the next couple of steps. Mm-hmm. This is where you're going. We have something, Builder Trends, a software we use, where it's, on Fridays, there's a look back. It's, hey, this is what happened this week. This is what is happening next week. Like you look ahead, a look back today, and then a look forward. And that is helpful if the clients read it. I'm also convinced, this is my new soapbox, I'm convinced men don't read. I'm absolutely convinced, without a doubt, that men don't read. I don't know, and I can say that because I'm a man. Men don't read. They stink at reading.
I confirm that.
You've heard it here on the Curious Builder Hot Take. Men don't read. Yes. We have to talk to our schools. Well, we could go for hours. I want to respect your time and the audience's time. We'll have everything in the show notes. Thanks again for coming in studio, and we'll see you for the next 2 years. You really made a mistake in answering my phone call, by the way. And I didn't say it not enough, but we'll have separate episodes where we'll have you on for 20 minutes. So we're having all of our partners that are partnered with Misahus on the podcast on our collaboration over the next year. And, that was our first kind of, as we were arming up for other projects you and I are working on, I asked you to take a look at Misahus, and a lot of people know what that is. And so I'm excited for when that comes to fruition, what it all looks like.
I remember that first conversation. I asked you, what's your favorite tree?
I said, did I say aspen?
No, you said, I don't know. Like, you just like totally avoided it. You're like, that's your job.
Oh, is that what it said?
You're like, you're supposed to tell me what my favorite. Why you ask so many questions?
Oh, that's so funny.
I think you're the one who should be questioning getting in with me.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Yeah, well, that could be. For someone who doesn't market, I thought you had really good branding. I am a little shocked that you don't have a sign. We're going to have to work on that. All right. Well, Curious Builder out.
Thanks for tuning in to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like this episode, do us a favor. Share it with 3 other business owners. The best way that we can spread what we're doing is by word of mouth, and with your help, we can continue to help other curious builders expand their business. Please share it with your friends, like and review online, and thanks again for tuning in.